operators probably need to be ingenious as well. Do they really need the 2G spectrum licenses or the 3G ones? Can they vacate them and transit people to 4G and now 5G and maybe subsidize the devices, for example? So there needs to be a bit of thinking out of the box. How efficient are they in managing their own costs? Have they tried hard enough to transit from diesel, for example, to renewable energy? Some will tell you, oh no, but when we tried that, they stole the solar cells and everything. Yeah, but we can't keep saying, we can't, okay, so because they blow up rail lines, so we say no more trains. So because there's still solar cells, we say, well, no more solar. We can't. So we need to have granular conversations.
Johnson Chukwu, the Group Managing Director at Cowry Asset Management, joins me now via Zoom. Mr. Chukwu, good morning and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Sister Nancy, and thank you for having me.
Welcome to the program. We have quite a lot to discuss, so let's just dig in very quickly. I will start by asking you, what do you think is the most pressing economic issue right now?
Well, the most pressing economic issue is Nigeria's foreign exchange position, foreign exchange earnings, which is impacting on several sectors of the economy. We've seen a situation where our oil production is quite below the OPEC quota of about 1.77 million barrels. The last time, the last quota before the current quota was about 1.753 million barrels. We produced far less than that. Prior to that, we had a 1.735 million barrels. We also produced less than that. If we do not improve our crude oil production, we are going to have a situation where we're not getting the benefit of current Russia-Ukrainian war, where we're taking the cost of the war, unlike what most oil producing countries are, where currently many of them are smiling to their banks because their reserve is swelling at crude price of over $108 per barrel. But unfortunately for us, we're not producing enough, but we're importing virtually all our refined petroleum products.
So which one should I take now? I'm torn in between taking you first on crude oil production. I'm also torn around taking the airlines. Okay, my gut say let me go with the airlines with what we've seen, at least in the past few days. What do you think about the current situation? The Airlines Association, Airline Operators of Nigeria, did say that they would go on a shutdown today, but they reversed that decision. And they did cite high operating costs that, of course, Jet A1 fuel, which was sold at around 200 naira in February of this year, is going for 700 naira now. The reasonable thing for a business to do is when your costs are high, you raise the price to rein in that. And the AON is saying that, oh, we are considering Nigerians and all of that. What's your view about this?
Nancy, it's an interesting situation we are witnessing in the country. We know that Jet A1 fuel is completely deregulated, but despite the deregulation, not everybody, all your marketers cannot bring it because they don't have access to FX. So you are constrained to a situation where only few of them can bring in Jet A fuel, and most of it is actually brought in by PPMC on behalf of NNPC. But beyond that, we also know that the Ukrainian, I had mentioned earlier that crude oil price had gotten to as high as $108 per barrel. We know that globally, the price of refined petroleum products have hit the roof because of the Ukrainian-Russian war, and that any commodity that is deregulated will be impacted by the war situation or the shortfall in supply of refined petroleum products. So the key questions we have to deal with now is that, will the airlines want the government to restore subsidy on Jet A1 fuel, that's aviation fuel, or is the problem they have that the government is not allowing them, that NCCA is not allowing them to increase the price of airfares Because the appropriate thing we should be dealing with is that what is a reasonable rate they can increase their airfare so as to compensate for the increase in aviation fuel. But we know we're dealing with a market situation, demand and supply. If you increase the price of your airfares beyond a certain threshold, you may really see a decline in the passenger traffic, which will affect your profitability. So we need to ask them what exactly they want. I know there was a time they wanted to increase fares, and the government came and said they can't increase fares. But as I know that the fares have actually increased over time. I mean, the past couple of weeks, we've seen the price of even economy tickets go as high as 80,000 naira per 1 hour flight, just a 1 hour flight. And that, what they're obviously saying is that increment is not enough to compensate for the increase in their cost of doing business, particularly the cost of A1 fuel. So they need to define what they want. And for me, because I'm an advocate of free market economy, the appropriate thing is that they should be given the latitude to increase the fares to a reasonable extent, to the extent that the flying masses can afford to pay while they cover their costs and make some reasonable profit. But we're dealing with a difficult situation. It's not just a Nigeria aviation fuel issue, it's a topical issue. Globally, aviation fuel have increased and the airlines are operating on a very thin margin. But I don't think they should push it back to the government by coming to say they want to shut down. I also know that it's going to be a difficult call for them to shut down, because if they shut down and they park the aircraft for 2 weeks, they need to go do some checks before they can go back to flying. And the cost of those checks will be more than whatever the value they want to extract from the government.
I like that you said the airline operators really need to come out clear, because it seems that even me, I'm getting a reading of non-clarity from them. Are they really asking for a subsidy? Because Jet A1 is not subsidized. What exactly are they asking for? But let's preempt that business now and take a look at, if they are not asking for subsidy, what are the options left for these airlines to embark on at this point?
Well, a few options are left for them to embark on. One is that I think the chairman of Airpeace had actually mentioned in one of his previous interviews that the government should give them license to bring in aviation fuel. Of course, give them license to bring in aviation fuel means they are oil marketers as well. In addition to giving them license, the government must also have to give them FX. But if they give them FX at IIE window rate, they will still land about the same price they are buying the aviation fuel. Like I said, aviation fuel globally has gone up. So the options they have is, one, deploy, rationalize their routes and only focus on routes that have very high load factor. That is where the passenger traffic is quite high. Secondly, they must also now begin to deploy aircraft that are fuel efficient in the meantime, because that's what is happening elsewhere in the world. Airline operators are deploying aircraft that are quite fuel efficient, and they are focusing on routes that are commercially viable. That, for me, what we may call short to medium term measures they need to take immediately, because the option of asking the government to now subsidize Jet A fuel and go back to what we have said, we're actually pushing that we should also exit subsidy on PMS. So to bring back a Jet A fuel would be a tough call for the country. So the airlines have to look inwards and look at, one, looking for deploying aircraft that are more fuel efficient, including if they have to go on wait lists to get those aircraft in the interim, they do that. And then rationalizing their routes and focusing on routes that have very strong load factor.
Mr. Chukwu, okay, I like I said, it's also, because is it really short term? Because if you're saying that they should begin to purchase new airplanes that are fuel efficient, that will also demand some kind of revenue, of monies on their part. They will expend money that they don't have right now. How about the option of importing this Jet A fuel themselves?
You know, I had mentioned that as an option, but I said, like,
I didn't hear that.
The chairman of Airpeace had said earlier that the government should give them rights or licenses to import Jet A fuel. But I said that will also go with the government set up and giving them, allocating FX to them. And if FX allocated them at IIE window rates, they will still land the imported jet A fuel at current price, because Nigeria, you're going to import from the global market. And as long as you import from the global market, you're going to land at around the same price that they are buying it from oil marketers. So that wouldn't be any major gain or any material benefit to them. The best they can do is that they're controlling supply source or their own supply, and they're not running out of products. But we still need to commit the same level of resources in getting those fuel. In terms of getting the aircraft, I mentioned the issue of wait lists, which they can get almost at short term. Then subsequently, the key thing is this is not the time to go on route development. Because one of the greatest challenges for airline operators is that when you go on route development, you need to now operate a route that is not commercially viable, hoping that with time, you're going to build the critical mass to make that route viable. This is not the time to do that. You need to focus on profitable routes and rationalize your routes so as to minimize your cost of operation.
How about, it seems more woes are coming in that sector, as we are seeing that the aviation union workers have embarked on strike. At least the information we got as at yesterday evening. Is it Fela's song now that comes to my mind? Okay, just Mr. Chukwu, just respond to that. Aviation workers going on strike.
You know that their strike was meant to coincide with the suspension of flights by the aviation airline operators. Fortunately for the economy, the airline operators called off their suspension of flights, but the aviation workers now said they are also asking for improved welfare, improved service standards. The challenge I've always said is that we're dealing with this in a pre-election year in this country. You go and look at it historically, you're going to deal with so many labor issues. Everybody wants to extract his pound of flesh, believing that the government is most vulnerable in a pre-election period. And they are all agitating because we are not aware there is a trade dispute. Personally, I wasn't aware of any trade dispute between the aviation workers and the airline operators. Or is it with FAN or the airline aviation regulators? So why are they going on a warning strike? Because warning strike means we've exhausted most of the other channels of dispute resolution, and we're now bringing the threats to show you what we can do if you don't resolve those issues. So I think all these things are just part of ways of extracting as much as anybody can extract from a government, because the strike action is here against the airline operators, is here against the airline aviation regulators. So who are they protesting against? And what are those conditions of service they are bringing to the public that they want to be addressed?
Yes, the song I was trying to remember earlier from Fela was Double Wahala for Daddy Body and the owner of Daddy Body. I think that's where we are right now, but let's still stick with the airlines a bit. We're looking at an industry. If we take a look at the history of how this industry has operated in Nigeria, we're looking at the survivability of these airlines, so to speak. We've seen, I think, the Okada Airs, the Nigeria Airways, and all of that. These are airlines that highest 15 years. If you're too good, 15 years. We've seen what is happening with Aero right now, Amcon, and all of that. What exactly is wrong with our airline industry in Nigeria? That's one. Number two. Okay, let me allow you to answer that. I'll come back to number two.
Well, I wouldn't limit it to what is wrong with the airline industry in the country. I will give a broader perspective to it. The airline business, a logistic business, is a thin margin business. Airline globally operate on very thin margin. And then a lot of times when the price of aviation fuel goes up, some airlines may go out of business, particularly those who are not cost efficient. So it's not just the rate of mortality we witness among local airline operators in the country. It's not limited to the countries. It's a global issue. And if you remember, even if you go globally, you remember the likes of British Caledonian Airlines. Several airlines have had issues. Recently, South African Airlines is out of the skies. Their international routes have all been withdrawn. I think I don't know. I think they have resumed local flights now, and they've gone through several bailouts by the government of South Africa. Similarly, several airlines in Nigeria, in Africa, national airlines have all gone out of business. But even if you go to Western countries, you also experience the same thing. It's a thin margin business, but then it's also worsened by the peculiarities of our own environment. For instance, we don't have aircraft maintenance. You can't carry out a C check within the Nigerian environment. You have to take this aircraft overseas to carry out your C check, and that will cost you payment in dollars. The hangars here have minimal maintenance capabilities, and a lot of those maintenance technical people are foreigners. You have to bring in to carry out those maintenance, which compel you to pay in dollars. So you're also dealing with a country where the currency are depreciating, because most airline costs are dollar denominated. Apart from your fuel, which you're paying in naira, your spare parts are imported and paid in dollars. If you have a lease, you are paying those leases in dollars. Your C checks are paid in dollars. Some of your pilots, foreign pilots, expatriate pilots are also paid in dollars. And then your local currency has been depreciating. And the rate of depreciation is faster than the rate of increase in terms of the freight charge, the freight we charge. So that puts local airlines in more difficult situation, even in addition to the inclement business environment that the airlines operate globally.
Okay, the second question I wanted to ask, which you also came to a bit, is the intervention funds. And I must say that we've seen a few intervention funds in the aviation industry. I know that as far back as the Sanusi days as the central bank governor, we had what we call the PAIV, Power Sector and Aviation Intervention Fund, I think in the tune of 300 billion naira. We also saw 120 billion naira in 2011, which was given to this sector. I can remember the hula baloo around, I think, the National Assembly then trying to probe and saying that 120 billion went to private pockets. I think as at last year, if I'm not mistaken, that's 2021, 27 billion naira was supposed to be earmarked also, which I think 5 billion naira was released. I don't know the update now if 27 minus 5, the remainder has been given to the sector. But this seems to be a sector that when you see intervention funds, it just goes, and we don't seem to have a very good grasp of accountability in that sector. Am I mistaken?
And Nancy, let me tell you something we have to also know about interventions. Interventions are stopgap measures put in government to correct an anomaly or to tidy through a short-term imbalance of economic or financial imbalance. If it's a long-term imbalance, there is nothing intervention fund can do. It becomes throwing good money after bad money. It becomes like a sinking hole. The first thing the government should always do is carry out an analysis or a proper appraisal to determine the nature of the problem you are dealing with. Is it a temporary shock, or is it an imbalance, a structural imbalance? If it's a temporary shock, that's when interventions can bail out, can solve the problem. So in that case, you just help the institution or the industry tidy up through a temporary shock. But if it's a structural imbalance, then efforts to throw resources at it will not lead any result. You need to address the foundation of that structural imbalance, like what we are dealing with in the case of power sector, where the government has come to do several interventions in the power sector, but until we make the power sector commercially viable, the interventions will keep swallowing up government resources. If you are talking about the airline industry, and you are saying, look, the key challenge we have is that we have seen situations where the currencies have been local currencies have been depreciating beyond the rate at which the airlines are permitted to increase their fares. So what you need to do is you index the price increase that the airlines are allowed to effect to some changes in the exchange rate and other parameters that have a direct impact, or that you have a one-on-one link between their cost of doing business and those elements. So if you do that, Then when they want to increase tariff, and you say, for instance, your currency are depreciated by 200%, and you want the tariff to be increased by 100%, there's going to be a gap. You create a structural gap that will make it impossible for those institutions to continue to maintain their aircraft at the global standard, at the same level with global standards, and still make profit. So for me, we must, before we go into intervention, determine whether we have a short-term gap or we have a structural problem. And then if it's a structural problem, deal with it from the foundation, and then that's when your intervention can be effective.
Let's talk about the power sector and what we've seen so far. In fact, the regulatory body of the power industry did say that it has not approved any tariff hike on its website. It said that the last tariff review was done last year, December. What do you think, really? Because you're seeing industry players coming out to say the cost of doing business is high in Nigeria. The cost of diesel, the cost of petrol, you know, okay, petrol is still being subsidized, but come on, whether Abuja and Lagos you buy for 165, if you move further away from these places, you're buying at over 165. So where's the subsidy? But where I'm going to really is, what are your views about the power sector right now, especially around what was being said last week?
If you look at the issues about increasing tariff in the power sector, I think the discourse we are agitating or pushing that the tariff should be increased by an average of 4 naira per kilowatt hour, which Nigerians are pushing back, and then the regulator is also saying that they've not granted that approval. But cast your mind back to the multi-year tariff order. There are parameters under which we will inform review of tariff. Those parameters include things like the price of gas, the inflation rate in US inflation rates, the exchange rate of the naira to the dollar, among some other parameters that inform that form the basis for a review of the tariff. So these parameters have shifted in the past couple of months. The US inflation rate is about 8.5% for the month of March. We know the exchange rate has also depreciated further. And then you are also looking at the price of gas. Globally, the price of gas has gone up as a result of the Ukrainian war. So the discourse have a basis to agitate that the tariff should be increased. But you now have to balance it with the ability of the consumers to pay, which is where the government is in a quagmire. If you increase the tariff in tandem with the defined criteria for review of the tariff, the power tariff, and then the income of the average Nigerian, because I saw a newspaper article that said the Nigerians are going to be worse off. The income of the average consumer has not improved. So the consumer is now suffering double whammy in terms of they are also suffering those other factors that are informed the increase in tariff, and then you also increase in electricity tariff. And again, you are not even seeing improvement in power supply. So you are going to pay more for darkness, which is where the problem is. Ordinarily, if these increments will lead to an improvement in power supply, improvement in number of hours of power availability, Nigerians could adjust their consumption pattern and accommodate this tariff. But it's the criteria for those increments are there, and current conditions have made it compelling for the increment. But unfortunately, the purchasing power of the Nigerian average consumer is going to take a strong beating with additional increase in tariff, particularly if it's not followed or preceded by even an improvement in power supply.
Mr. Chukwu, it's a season of increments. It's a season of price adjustments in Nigeria. It's a season of hikes. It's a season of prices going up. The next sector also that is looking at prices going up is the telecom sector, and I did talk about this on Friday. The sector is saying that it will increase cost of data, SMS, and calls. It also cited high operating cost, that a liter of diesel goes for 700 naira a liter now. In fact, I spoke to one of them, of the association, members of the association on Thursday, and he told me, he said, Nancy, tell me how we can survive. The two options is you're telling me we're going to cut staff strength. Should we lay off workers? What should we do? We can't continue like this. You know, and I was listening to him on Thursday. So what do you think, really? What is happening?
You know, Nancy, we're dealing with the same fundamental issues: exchange rate depreciation, price of energy globally, price of fuel globally. And unfortunately, because we have such huge infrastructural gap and our power supply is very weak, because the telco companies, for instance, virtually all of them are running on self-generated power. And that self-generated power is fueled. They use AGO fuel, that is diesel, as a major fuel source, although some of them alternate between battery and fuel. So if price of fuel has gone to 700 naira per liter, I'm talking of AGO of diesel, and then they are running most of their cell sites on diesel-generated power, then it becomes compelling that it becomes, there's no gain, there's no fact denying the realities that they are now incurring higher cost of doing business or higher cost of operation. And somehow that cost of operation has to be paid for. And the only way it can be paid for is for them to increase tariff. So these are problems that we have to deal with, the structural issues of the economy. Ideally, we are an oil producing country. We should be a refined petroleum product exporting country, but we are not. We are importing all our refined petroleum products. So we are being directly hit by global issues around the Ukrainian war. We're being hit by exchange rate issues, and that has translated into all service providers asking for increment, particularly if the component of their service have these cost elements, cost of energy, FX cost. So you can't, I pity Nigerians because head or tail, something we have to give in. It's either we pay more for this service or this service will be degraded or deteriorate. Because what you're going to see eventually is that if they can't power cell site, they will shut down those cell sites. So in some locations, you may have drop calls or failed data service because they cancel. They must make sure that those things are profitable. So it's a difficult situation, which takes also the foundation of our structure of the economy, which we must, as a people, begin to discuss how we're going to address it.
Now, if we take a look at government's revenue for 2021, I can't even say it because it's heavy. I can't say that the federal government spent 96% of its revenue on debt servicing in 2021. And I must tell you that it did spend 97% of its revenue on debt servicing in 2020. So what that means in lay terms, let me explain it to the average woman in Wuse Market or Balogun watching. If you make 1,000 naira, you are spending 970 naira on servicing your debts. That is what it is right now in Nigeria. Mr. Chukwu, where have we really found ourselves, especially as it concerns revenue? I've heard the minister say, Minister of Finance, say times without number that we do have a revenue challenge. Some people do think we do have a spending challenge.
It's actually a chicken and egg thing to say you have a revenue challenge and you have an expenditure challenge. The key, appropriately, ideally, your cost should be within your earnings capacity. If you have an over-bloated cost profile without taking cognizance of your capacity to earn revenue, there's a problem. And that's where we have found ourselves. So in that case, you're saying, look, if only I can get more money. But the first thing to do is cut down your cost to be in tandem with your earnings. Nancy, you can be in unemployment and then you're earning 100,000 in a month. And then you are saying, look, I'll be spending 150, and they say the problem is that they don't increase my salary. So that's big gas logic. But back to what we're saying, the situation we're pushing this country into is a difficult situation. We've seen our national debt balloon to about $95 billion. That's local and foreign debt. About $38 billion of foreign denominated debt. About of that, about 15. The foreign debt about 15 trillion naira, and it's still growing. And you are looking at the national debt at about the same level with our foreign reserve. And this foreign reserve will put this gross foreign reserve. So if you have that level of debt and you are still borrowing more, you are still having deficit in your expenditure. Take, for instance, in the first quarter of this year. Central Bank report says that the federal government deficit was about 2.2 trillion naira in the first 3 months of this year. Multiply that by 4. Nancy, you're going to be dealing with something like 9 trillion naira deficit this year. That 9 trillion naira will be borrowed. So if you borrow additional 9 trillion naira to the existing 38 trillion naira of debt, public debt, what will happen? The next year, you're going to take even an instance that you're paying 10% on 9 trillion naira. That's the 900 billion naira you will pay, additional debt service you will pay next year if you borrow 9 trillion this year. And this is still growing. And we're not doing anything about cutting down on the cost of doing governance in the country. Our strategy to grow the revenue is also questionable, because if you want to grow revenue, you have to grow an economy that is productive. It is the businesses that are making profit in the economy that will give government the tax revenues that will reduce the debt service to revenue ratio.
Okay, let's talk about the big elephant in the room also, which is about the economic challenges for Nigeria's next leader. Whosoever that person will be, I don't know, I can see a lot of shenanigans going on within the political parties now, and the number of aspirants. I don't think I've seen this number. Mr. Chukwu, I think it's only you that is remaining not to declare for president now, because everybody's declaring for president. But I don't know if they do have an understanding of the economic challenges that are before who the next leader will be. What do you think? Because all these people that I'm seeing is not about, I don't want to be hearing all those stories like Mr. President told us in 2015, oh, I'm going to give you light. Oh, I'm going to stop security. Oh, I'm going to stop all this. And we've seen nothing. As it were, we've seen a few. Let me not just be overly critical. But pen to paper as to the understanding of what Nigeria's challenges are, and as to getting the practical solutions to getting us out of this well which we have found ourselves. So the challenges of the next leader, Mr. Chukwu, why you smile? You want to declare here?
You know what? That's why I'm smiling. I thought you would champion my cycle of friends, particularly my media friends that would get me a form. As my friend, I thought you would be the chairperson to drive other media friends of mine to contribute 100 million naira.
So it will be Johnson Chukwu support group.
Their funds from their friends.
Yes, Johnson Chukwu support group for president. No, but you won't even find me there, because that's not my area. I don't want to delve into it. I'm still watching what's happening. Then at the end of the day, we'll come back here to the table. But what do you have to say about what I asked?
Okay, in the first place, the greatest challenge Nigeria is facing is actually economic challenge. The security challenge we have is partly a fallout of the economic challenges and to some extent some political challenges. But the core of our problem is economic challenges. And if we don't get a leader who understands the economy, who can build an economy that is productive, who can attract foreign direct investment into the country. I was looking at the figures of foreign capital importation last year. We received only $6.7 billion throughout last year, of which 40%, 3.838 billion, were from portfolio investments. So the amount that came out foreign investment was less than 3 billion of the entire last year. So we must have a president who understands economic issues, who will ensure that the economy is productive, and who will address some of these structural defects. Structural defects relates to power supply, of energy supply, energy sources. And when I talk of energy sources, I'm talking of the entire gamut of the energy value chain, which will include our gas supply, our fuel supply, our crude oil production, our refined petroleum products, the power sector, gas supply to the power sector, power transmission, power distribution, power tariff. We need to have somebody who has that deep knowledge. If we get the energy sector right, which should be a priority number one of the new government, then we must also involve the appropriate economic policy that will incentivize each of these sectors of the economy who have competitive advantage, so that we'll attract investment in those sectors. We use the policy to attract the reforms in the telecommunications sector, and the entire investment in the telecommunications is private sector driven. We must replicate that in several other sectors of the economy, but it must come on the foot, it must come on the table, or from the table of a president who has a deep understanding of the economic issues. Once we get the economy right, a lot of things will fall into place. If the economy fails, a country begins to fail, or every system fails when the economy fails. The other things are symptomatic of economic failures. Government cannot fund security. A lot of people who should ordinarily be working are not working, and they are devil's work tools. And then you have situation where you are dealing with multiplicity of issues that are drawing from inability to grow the economy.
Mr. Chukwu, I think we will leave it here and continue to watch the environment and see how that goes. But of course, there are numerous, enormous challenges ahead of Nigeria's next leader. I don't know who that will be. But just like I said, it shouldn't be same old, and Nigerians at this point in time should be more critical than they have been before. That is all of us. And we should also, you know, interrogate further these people. We shouldn't just be satisfied for them just giving us headlines, oh, this and this. Everybody knows Nigeria's problem. The question is, who is going to fix it and give us the fixes? We are able also to interrogate the solutions which you've brought to fore. Thank you very much, Mr. Chukwu, for joining us today on the show.
My pleasure, Ashija.
I've been speaking with Johnson Chukwu, who is the Group Managing Director of Cowry Asset Management. It's it for us here on the program today. Thank you for joining us. Be the best you can be, and be that change that you want to see. I am Nancy Naji. I'll see you all again next time. Bye now.